I don't want to become a chapter by chapter One Piece reviewer, but some of the discussion that I've seen around chapter 1043, spoilers of course, by the way, is kind of distressing to me. And specifically the fact that for some reason, people have decided that Kid and Law just aren't as important as Luffy in the raid, and I don't necessarily want to engage in power scaling discussions either, but I can't just sit by and ignore the fact that people seem to not really understand how these fights actually played out. So, with that said, let's talk about why I believe that Law and Kid deserve to have an equal bounty to Luffy. So, first of all, exceptionally broadly speaking, when it comes to power scaling in One Piece, I would say that portrayal by Oda is substantially more important than the actual feats of the characters. So, what do I mean by this? We haven't seen Kid use Advanced Conqueror's Haki, or his Awakened Devil Fruit doesn't have all of the insane hacks potential that we see in Luffy's Awakened Devil Fruit. But in the Udon prison mine, they were shown to be equals. They got the same amount of rocks moved, they ate the same amount of food. Oda showed that at the end of the day, these two are people who are at about the same level and with about the same type of stubborn, striving for the top type personality. So, even if Kid doesn't necessarily have as impressive of feats coming out of the Onigashima raid as Luffy in your perspective, the fact of the matter is, Oda has portrayed them as being essentially the same tier of character. That is, an up-and-coming rookie who has the drive to make it to the top. And even in Sabaody Archipelago, Kid was the only character to have a higher bounty than Luffy, and granted, that was justified in universe as because he was more likely to harm civilians than Luffy, but the fact of the matter is, you don't get to 315 million berries by just sitting on your hands during your journey throughout the Grand Line. You gotta be doing some really big world-shaking stuff. And with that idea of portrayal being more important than feats in mind, you might immediately think, well, Law has kind of been portrayed to just sort of be dragged along by Luffy, that he might set up plans and have these sorts of grand ideas about how to best move forward, but at the end of the day, he's allied with Luffy, and that means that Luffy's going to do whatever he wants. Law's plans be completely thrown out the window. And I would also say that leading up to the raid in Onigashima, Law had substantially less impressive feats than Luffy. He basically couldn't lift a finger against Doflamingo, whereas Luffy was able to 1v1 him with a little bit of support here and there along the way with his Gear 4th abilities. So you might think, okay, I could maybe see that Kid is being portrayed as a true rival and equal to Luffy, but definitely not Law. Law is just the guy who keeps getting dragged along by his crazy, stubborn older brothers. If you look at the two key moments of the three of them fighting together against the Marines at Sabaody Archipelago, and the three of them fighting against the Beast Pirates at the beginning of the Onigashima raid, you'll see that Oda is making it very clear that these three are, of the supernovas at Sabaody Archipelago, the three most important ones, the three you need to be paying attention to, and the three who are most likely to rise to the top of the pirate world. And the fact of the matter is, they're the only supernovas who aren't either out of commission, subordinate to another Yonko, or whereabouts unknown at this point. And that counts for something. The fact that they have been in the New World for as long as they have and stubbornly refused to stop striving for the top. All three of them. And yeah, Law isn't that sort of bullheaded, chaotic personality that Kid and Luffy are, but he's still a supernova. He's still that tactical, take a step back and really think about how to handle the situation type of guy. But I think that a lot of One Piece fans just weigh their perspective on the feats that each of the characters accomplishes during the Onigashima raid specifically, and decides in their own head that Luffy contributed substantially more than the other two. And, Luffy at the end of the day 1v1'd Kaido, while Kid and Law had to work together to beat Big Mom. So naturally that means that Luffy is closer to being Yonko level, right? Well, wrong, honestly. In my opinion, Kid and Law working together probably could have taken down Kaido. But I don't think that Luffy alone could have taken on Big Mom. Let me explain. So we've heard several times throughout the series, if it's 1v1, bet on Kaido. Kaido is the strongest creature in the One Piece world. He's king of the beasts. All this hype has built up around Kaido essentially being the strongest, most definitive threat in the pirate world. And he definitely lived up to the hype. He, during the Onigashima raid, was faced with a gauntlet of people, from the 5 on the rooftop when they were fighting against him and Big Mom, or 1v1ing Luffy, or taking big hits from Zoro. And you can even throw Yamato in there, though I think that Yamato is probably one of the harder characters to power scale because of his relatively limited interactions during the Onigashima raid. And this, all the while, carrying the entire island with his own dragon flames, which, who knows how much energy that took out of him? Who knows what percentage of strength that represented that he wasn't able to use in a 1v1 fight? And I'm definitely not in any way trying to undermine Luffy's achievement, because Kaido was an absolute monster, and he pushed Luffy to his absolute limit, and Luffy, to his credit, unlocked important key abilities and was able to go toe-to-toe with this absolute monster. But when we hear 1v1 bet on Kaido, what a lot of people aren't considering, I think, is the fact that Big Mom isn't really a 1v1 fighter. Just by the very nature of her devil fruit, she is always creating support monsters in the form of homies to be able to fight alongside her. So even if they aren't as physically strong as the main person, even if they don't have all of the stats that Big Mom has, they are still a thing that needs to be considered that can act independently of Big Mom. And I think that Luffy doesn't really have the right tools with his devil fruit to be able to handle that sort of fight in a 1v1 situation. Whereas Kid and Law, I think, have substantially more versatile devil fruits that are better equipped to dealing with that kind of fighter. Law in particular probably has one of, if not the most versatile devil fruit that we have seen in all of One Piece. And over the course of the fight, Big Mom was showing all sorts of crazy abilities with her devil fruit, from creating homies on the fly to stealing life force from all of the spectators in order to regenerate herself, to turning her bones into homies so that they wouldn't be broken anymore. I just don't see Luffy being able to come up with any sorts of countermeasures to these. But with the combination of Law and Kid's particular devil fruits, they had the ability to have a lot of workarounds. They could move her homies around independently of her. Kid could magnetize any of them that were made out of metal and effectively incapacitate them. Law was able to completely change the battlefield at every course of events, and both of their awakenings gave them some kind of insane hacks abilities. And when it comes to the rooftop battle with the 5v2, pretty much all of the people on Luffy's side were focused on dealing as much damage as possible to Kaido, and they didn't completely ignore and neglect Big Mom, but I don't think she really took any big hits over the course of Roof Piece. So she was pretty much at 100% when it was time for her to fight against Kid and Law. Now, do I think that Big Mom is objectively stronger than Kaido? No, I just think that they have very different skill sets, and the type of skill sets that they have were better suited to each of the final matchups that they were in. Luffy and Kaido both had awakened mythical zone fruits, and because of that, they were able to have a more straightforward physical brawl, and that's the type of fight that both of them are incredibly accustomed to and incredibly well suited to because of their straightforward, more honorable type fighting style. However, Law and Kid don't have that sense of honor. They're not afraid to fight dirty and use tricks, and Big Mom is very similar. She will use homies. She will steal souls from spectators. She will use her environment to her advantage in a way that Kaido doesn't have the ability to with his devil fruit in the first place, and even if he did, that's just not the type of guy that he is, based on what we've seen from him. So, like, if you look from the outside at a distance, you can say, oh yeah, Luffy did a 1v1 versus an Emperor, and Kid and Law had to 2v1 an Emperor, so Luffy must definitively be stronger than the other two. But if you look at the situation significantly more broadly and let go of the idea that the Yonko all fight the same and are suited to the same type of opponent, then you can realize that Luffy probably couldn't have done anything against Big Mom, and Kaido was the perfect opponent for him. Meanwhile, Kid and Law, through their various trickery, probably could have taken down Kaido, and I could see that fight in my imagination still playing out in their favor, but they were better suited, and they used those specific counter-type abilities that they had against Big Mom in order to be able to fight her in a way that nobody else could on the Alliance side. All of that is completely ignoring the fact that Law is personally responsible for planning the overall Onigashima raid. Like, sure, he worked together with Kinemon and the rest of the Scabbards, but, like, Kinemon couldn't have planned anything around this, and Law was able to specifically plan for the way that Luffy and Kid are, the way that they behave, and he used that to his advantage. And even when Kid was stubbornly trying to say he could take on Big Mom by himself, Law had the ability to convince Kid that he was necessary and helpful in that fight. Because at the end of the day, bounties aren't Dragon Ball Z power levels. They don't 100% represent the raw fighting ability of the character with the bounty. Bounties represent a litany of different factors, from obviously fighting ability to political influence and strategic prowess. They're not just plug in the number, bigger bounty wins, and that's exactly what's been portrayed throughout the entire series. So even if you want to conceive of Luffy as being substantially stronger in a direct fight than the other two, that doesn't matter in terms of bounties, because bounties are a matter of these three people are the figureheads of the force that took down two emperors. So they're going to be the same bounty because they are co-leaders. They share the same amount of clout and leadership position within the Alliance. And a follow-up question that a lot of you might have is, well, then why did Luffy become an emperor and not the other two? And I think that's a matter of two factors. First of all, Emperor Buggy was necessary. It had to happen. Oda is a genius and a mad lad for making it a reality. It doesn't matter what Buggy was doing off screen. Buggy deserves everything in the world. He deserves to be the only emperor. He deserves to be Pirate King. He deserves to be Pirate God. But secondly, it's just a matter of Luffy has a longer and more storied history of wreaking havoc throughout the world. I mean, going into the raid, he was already essentially considered the fifth emperor, and he had a substantially higher bounty than Law or Kid. But based on presumably Apu's and CP0's reporting to Morgan's, Luffy just had a longer history, in spite of the fact that the three of them were given shared credit for the final raid. But, like, if something happens to Buggy or Shanks or Blackbeard, then I don't think anyone would bat an eye at considering Law or Kid the replacement emperor. And personally, I think that Kid is a better fit just because of his personality, but I could see either of them taking the place of an emperor if one gets dethroned. Plus, of course, there's the overarching narrative to consider, that is, Luffy is the main character, so if someone's going to get elevated to emperor status, then it's gonna be him. Like, if it's a choice between him and two other guys at about the same power level, it's gonna be our boy, because he's gonna be Pirate King after Buggy. So at the end of the day, this is just like a rant. It's not that big a deal, but when Oda is giving these people the same bounties, it's not because he's trying to force a dynamic, as I've seen some people say. It's because the dynamic is there. These three have consistently been portrayed as equal or roughly equal when they've appeared together throughout the series, both before and during the Onigashima raid. So it makes perfect sense that they would have the same bounty. And this isn't even like a Zoro-Sanji situation where they're constantly going to be, laddering up past each other. They're just the same sort of tier of character. And of course, by the end of the series, Luffy is going to have a grand bounty of probably 5.6 billion, as several have suspected, because of, Gomu. But for the time being, it makes sense that Law and Kid are sharing in that clout just as much as he is. But if you disagree, that's your prerogative. Let me know, and, call me whatever mean names you want to call me. It's not important to me. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope to see you again soon.